should that party be there as part of the debates, but I think also anybody who's polling and looking like, polling and registering in the bigger polls. So I think that TOP and the New Conservative Party and the Maori Party should absolutely be part of those debates as well. And in fact, we're still in a first past the post mindset with some of these television debates, particularly where just the two leaders of the major parties are there. I think they should all be there so that they have their say. These are the parties that are going to form governments, so they should all be heard together.
Tricky one, Anton. I'm not quite sure how much you know about Advance NZ, but do you think they should be part of a TVNZ debate?
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm sort of, I'm thinking back to a video that I watched years and years ago. Trevor Noah, who you might know is a famous comedian over in America, has a pretty good late night show. And I remember the controversy that occurred when he got a totally different sort of opinion on his show. He got a woman by the name of Tommy Lauren, I think it was. And he copped a lot of flack for it, but I actually thought it was really good because, and it speaks to your point around getting everyone involved in a political debate, because it gives you an opportunity. I mean, I think sometimes we continue to see what the internet wants us to see, and we end up seeing stuff that reaffirms and confirms what we already think about, when it comes to things that are political. The wonderful thing about having a political debate with a vast number of different opinions is that you actually get to see a little bit about what other people see, and you actually get to see what other people are thinking. And so I actually think it's healthy because it gives you an opportunity to see everyone's perspective, and then you can actually make an informed decision. Now, whether that means it confirms that you think the other side is a complete loony, then that's fine as well. But at least you've had an opportunity to hear everyone's opinion, so you're making an informed decision. Otherwise, I mean, the risk is that you only ever hear your side of the story, and that's actually not healthy either.
That'll be interesting for our listeners to see whether they agree with that. But Professor of Law at Waikato University, Al Gillespie, thank you very much for your time. Yeah, interesting. On a final note, in a very light Friday note, a South Canterbury couple have raised a pigeon they rescued when it fell from its mother's nest 4 years ago and have been rewarded with getting high fives from him whenever they get close. They're not sure if he's intending his actions as a greeting or if it's an inbuilt defence to ward off danger. It appears he's quite happy with the couple as well as high fives. He likes to follow the couple around and play with their dog. So on a final note, any of you had pets that did a trick? Heather Roy.
Not anything spectacular other than a dog who was a wonderful escape artist.
Oh, yes. Yep. Couldn't keep behind the fence.
No, it didn't matter what we did.
Really? Anton, what about you?
Oh, no, look, very, very similar to Heather, not unless you consider sitting down when you say e noho to your dog. Oh, look, I suppose my one claim to fame is that my dog probably only responds to te reo Māori, and so that's perhaps one point of difference. But no, look, he's I tend not to anthropomorphise my dog. It's a dog, and I love him to bits. But no, he's not jumping up and doing any roly polies or joining the circus anytime soon.
We're back to Paul the octopus, really, aren't we?
Yes, that's right. Back to Paul the octopus. That's my one thing I've changed. Octopus is not on the menu. I used to love it, but that is gone. Hey, by the way, just a quick response, Anton, your website address that you put your videos up.
Oh, look, it's actually on. We don't put them on our website, although we might. But if you just visit us on Facebook, Fush Fush on Facebook, and look, there's a whole bunch of videos there that you can check out in your own time.
Anton Matthews, Heather Roy, thank you so much for being a wonderful Friday panel with me. And thank you to Melita Tull for putting the week together. I'm Wallace Chapman. Checkpoint is next. Stay safe on the roads, particularly in Auckland, and see you Monday.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E Haereaki nei, a freak gust of wind flips a truck on Auckland's Harbour Bridge and smashes another one around, causing gridlock and a traffic tail that's still wagging now. 4 lanes will be closed for the weekend, maybe longer. NZTA joins us with the latest. Nationals flip-flop. It's now promising more than $4.5 billion of tax cuts. But there is a but. It's for a short time only. The party's finance spokesperson, Paul Goldsmith, does the sums live. A Dunedin pizza parlour is not big on visitors from COVID country, Aucklanders that is, but Queenstown is lining up to offer bespoke isolation to elite sports people. Don't forget, you can catch us live on Facebook.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Piki mai, kaki mai, I'm Shelley Venning. The National Party believes its economic and tax policy will boost business confidence. It's unveiled a $4.5 billion tax cut package, which would run from this December to March 2022. The tax cuts would be paid for out of the $14 billion COVID recovery fund, and super fund contributions would be suspended. National leader Judith Collins says the package will give the average earner $50 more a week.
It is really important that New Zealanders and businesses are out there investing, having more money in their pockets, actually making decisions to grow the economy. That is absolutely crucial. We haven't seen business lack of confidence as it is quite like anything we've got at the moment. And that is going to hold back people getting jobs, and it's going to hold back people investing.
Judith Collins. Labour leader Jacinda Ardern says the middle of a pandemic and a recession is not the time to cut taxes. Ms Ardern says this is unaffordable and totally irresponsible.
At this time where we need to be making sure that we're investing in our services, that we do have a fund available as we continue to manage COVID, they are raiding that for tax cuts. That's just not right, and it is not the actions of a responsible party, let alone a responsible economic manager.
Jacinda Ardern. The Transport Agency is advising Auckland motorists to delay travel on motorways due to heavy congestion clogging the network. Several lanes on Auckland's Harbour Bridge were closed after an accident earlier today, and motorists are advised to avoid the bridge if possible. The agency says all Auckland motorways are affected by heavy congestion, and it's urging people already on the road to be patient. The 4 middle lanes on the bridge will be closed over the weekend after a freak gust of wind toppled a truck this morning, causing substantial damage. A Met Service meteorologist Lewis Ferris says the wind was gusting at just over 60 kilometres per hour when it suddenly doubled in strength to 120 for just 3 minutes.
The gust that we saw this morning in Harbour Bridge is a very rare occurrence. In the last 10 years, the Harbour Bridge has only recorded comparable speeds, just once.
Lewis Ferris says the worst of the wild weather is over and no strong winds are expected over the weekend. A parent at a school where a child with COVID-19 attended says he's getting his children tested for peace of mind. A pupil attended the Chapel Downs School near Botany briefly on Monday morning and returned a positive test that afternoon. A COVID testing station set up at the school has been swamped today with people seeking a test after the positive test result. One parent in the queue says he's taking his children to get tested to ensure they haven't caught the virus.
We've seen how bad it can be for people, and we've also, learned, from the science, of the impact of getting the disease. So, yeah, better safe than sorry.
That's a parent at Chapel Downs School. Fonterra shareholders say it's a relief to see the dairy co-op out of the red. The company today posted a full-year profit of $659 million, a big change from last year's massive loss of $605 million. It's also announced a milk price for the season just ended of $7.14 per kilogram of milk solids. This is the fourth highest milk price in Fonterra's history. Federated Farmers Dairy Chair Wayne Langford says it's great to see things have been turned around.
There's been a real concern of many farmers that I've talked to, and it's been quite a constant comment. So, good to see them back in the black. The dividend, while not high, it's great to get something. I think is kind of the response I'm getting from farmers.
Wayne Langford from Federated Farmers. Services are restarting after a person was struck by a train in central Auckland. Emergency services were called to Kingsland train station on New North Road at 3:15. The person has been taken to hospital in a serious condition. It's 5:04. In sport, a complete itinerary and timeline for the All Blacks Rugby Championship campaign should be known by the end of next week, and then the Rugby Players Association will sound out players as to whether they want to go. Players Association head Rob Nichols says no player has decided they won't attend the tournament, though he concedes there are concerns around the length of time they'll be away from home. The All Blacks will spend several days together next week, and Nichols says it would be nice to be able to give the players some clarity.
Hopefully by the end of next week we've got something pretty clear. The team's going into camp next week. It would be kind of nice if by the end of that we had something that was kind of getting 90-95% complete for them to think about. The major one is that length of time away from home, but even beyond that it's more about where every individual is at and what they've got going on in their family and personal lives.
Rob Nicholl. The Warriors have landed a pair of Olympic gold medal winning sevens players for their looming NRL W campaign. Australian sevens pair Elia Green and Ivania Peliti have both been named in the squad announced by the New Zealand club today. The squad, which features 5 New Zealand-based players, also includes 4 players from the Australian International League side. The NRLW kicks off next month and will be aligned with the men's NRL Finals Series. US Tennis Open champion Naomi Osaka has withdrawn from the upcoming French Open with a hamstring injury. That's the news.
Kia ora, Julian Wilcox here, in for Kim Hill on Saturday morning. This week, Harvard Healthy Buildings expert Joe Allen on how COVID-19's changing the design of our offices and homes. And from Black Power to Black Lives Matter, a history of sporting protest. Plus Australian barrister Andrew Bowe on representing serial killers. And Sasha Dench, who follows birds' migrations on a motorised hang glider, a human swan with a fear of flying. Coming up tomorrow from 8 a.m. to midday here on RNZ National.
And you're listening to RNZ National, funded through New Zealand On Air. Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. For Northland, Auckland, Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty, fine with the odd shower in Northland and Auckland today and isolated showers everywhere tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, rain clearing to fine this evening, isolated showers tomorrow afternoon and evening, mainly about the ranges. Waikato to Manawatu, including the central high country, cloudy periods with isolated showers tomorrow. Wellington, Horowhenua, Kapiti Coast and Wairarapa, fine weather. Nelson and Marlborough, fine with isolated showers from tomorrow afternoon. Canterbury and Otago, mainly fine, a few showers about southern Otago. Bulla, Westland, Fiordland and Southland, fine spells and a few showers clearing from Westland tomorrow morning. In the Chatham Islands, a few showers. It's 7 minutes past 5.
Kia ora, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Lanes of the Auckland Harbour Bridge could be out of action for several weeks after a freak gust of wind toppled 2 trucks, causing damage to the bridge's superstructure. The incident closed lanes, caused huge snakes of gridlocked traffic, grinding chunks of the super city to a halt today. 2 lanes each way have now reopened, but motorists are being warned of delays through the evening and to avoid the bridge entirely if they can. Video journalist Nick Monroe and Amy Williams filed this report.
A sudden gust of wind on Auckland's Harbour Bridge was all it took for 2 trucks to collide and roll one onto its side. A medium-sized truck travelling in lane 3 northbound was hit by a strong gust of wind and blown across 2 lanes, toppling over the movable lane barrier where it became stuck. At the same time, a truck carrying a shipping container was blown sideways, hitting the bridge's overarch, but it managed to right itself and carry on. Met Service meteorologist Lewis Ferris says the wind was gusting at just over 60 kilometres per hour when it suddenly doubled in strength to 120 kilometres per hour for just 3 minutes.
And they doubled in strength as that front passed over, so across the Harbour Bridge, but then in about 5 minutes after that, 10 minutes after that, that wind speed had dropped right off as it turned around to the southwest.
Mr Ferris says it was a once-in-a-decade weather event centred on the Harbour Bridge.
The gust that we saw this morning in Harbour Bridge is a very rare occurrence. In the last 10 years, the Harbour Bridge has only recorded comparable speeds just once.
Emergency services were called to the crash shortly after 11 o'clock this morning. There were no serious injuries. The truck driver was taken to hospital for a checkup and released soon after. The toppled truck was from Castle Parcels. Its general manager, Michael Claydon, says they're working with the police and truck driver to understand the sequence of events and conditions that caused the accident. The incident caused huge delays for people trying to cross the bridge. Long lines of traffic fanned around motorway on-ramps. Waka Kotahi, the transport agency's senior journey manager, Neil Walker, says the incidents caused some damage to the bridge.
We're currently having a look at the damage and trying to determine how long it's going to take us to get it repaired. It's a reasonably important part of the bridge, so we can't run traffic on it while that damage is there.
Mr Walker says the 4 middle lanes will remain closed over the weekend and possibly on Monday while the damage is repaired. It appears the worst of the wild weather is over. Met Services Lewis Ferris says the weekend is looking calm.
But the wind was very strong around the Harbour Bridge at around 11 a.m. today. Good news is that wind is dropping back, and we don't expect any winds of that comparable strength through the weekend. However, we do expect there will be some cloud and possible isolated showers around Auckland through the weekend.
For anyone heading north this evening, congestion is expected to be heavy. Motorists are asked to travel via the Western Ring route on alternative state highways and avoid the bridge. For Checkpoint, Amy Williams.
We'll speak to NZTA for the very latest after 6. If you're out there, let us know what it's like. Text us on 2101. To the Hapai Tōranga Pū now, the election campaign. Nationals unveiled a plan for what it calls a massive short-term stimulus. Translation, tax cuts. The party's promising more than $4.5 billion in temporary tax breaks, starting in December and ending in March 2022 if it's elected. It says putting more money into people's pockets will reduce economic damage due to COVID and will also help the economy bounce back faster. National also plans to lower the annual cap for new government spending from $2.4 billion to $1.8 billion. But it says that doesn't mean less spending on core services. So how does that work? Well, National's finance spokesperson Paul Goldsmith is here to explain. Good evening. You started off by saying no tax cuts and now you're saying yes to tax cuts. So what specifically has changed?
Look, I think it's gradually come over the last few weeks, particularly after the second lockdown, and we're seeing the impact that that's had on jobs and on businesses. And more importantly, the devastating impact it's had on confidence, particularly business confidence. Now the people wondering if we're going to yo-yo in and out, what does all this mean? And that's really had a long-term impact on people's mindsets. And then we saw confirmed in the pre-fu the Treasury's numbers that came out earlier this week that the recession is going to be longer and harder than expected. High unemployment for not just this year, but for the next couple of years. And so our view is that we do need more stimulus. Now, there's different ways of doing it. The government has been shoveling money out in terms of the shovel-ready projects and infrastructure things, and there's a role for that. But there comes a point where you're losing the quality of the programs, and we think the other way to stimulate is to get money back into the hands of people through a tax cut, and that's what we're suggesting.
Okay, so costing about $4.7 billion, and you're taking that from unspent COVID funds. Is that responsible? Because what happens if there's another COVID outbreak and you've spent the money on sending people to the shops?
Well, there's $14 billion left over in the COVID emergency fund.
But aren't you spending $5 billion of that as well, of unspent funds going to debt reduction?
Well, what we've said is that of the $14 billion, we're going to spend nearly $5 billion of that on tax relief, immediate tax relief, which is exactly what the purpose of the fund is, to stimulate the economy. Then we've got $9 billion left over. We're guessing, and it's only a guess, that we may have to spend up to $4 billion of that, and we're working on the assumption we might be able to not spend the remaining $5 billion. But who knows? Nobody knows what's going to happen in the next little while. If we do have to spend the whole $9 billion, then we'll take on more debt.
Okay, so this is supposed to be a stimulus package, and you've said in your media release it will ignite the economy. What's an ignited-looking economy? I mean, how many fewer jobs will we lose as a consequence of this, and what are the measurables here for success?
Well, look, I mean, the starting point is we've lost about 70,000 jobs since March. The Treasury just a couple of days ago anticipated that we could be losing another 100,000 jobs in the next two years. And, we don't want to see that happen if we possibly can avoid it. And so what we want to see is businesses hiring new people and expanding. So the two elements of what we're talking about today.
Understand that, but specifically the numbers. So what are the cost benefits? In terms of your spending of $4.7 billion on this stimulus package, how many jobs specifically will that save?
You won't be able to find a single economist anywhere in the world who can give you a number on particular jobs. All you can say is that you're going to have a stronger and more robust economy, people more likely to spend if they've got more money in their pockets. And the second element of the tax package, of course, is increasing the depreciation rates for businesses to encourage them to invest. What we want is businesses investing to grow, and we want people with more money in their pockets to get out and spend that on hospitality and tourism. But
how do you know they will? How do you know they will spend it then? Because for it to work, they have to spend it.
Well, you can't tell people what to do. All you can do is give them the option. And what we're looking at here is targeted on particularly on people on the average income around $64,000 a year. They'll have an extra $3,000 in the hand over the 16 months. And of course, if you're a double income family, that could be up to $6,000.
Yeah, so why not target it? Why not target it in a more focused way? So more money goes to the higher earners because of a proportion of their income. They're going to get more back. Did you mean it to be that way, that the higher earners, you wanted a stimulus package that meant more money would go to higher earners? Why not target it to low-income people who might be harder hit here?
Well, it's targeted, like I say, so that in terms of percentage income, the group that will benefit the most are those on the average income around $64,000. And they'll get the biggest boost in terms of percentage of their income. And, we're focusing people who are middle-income workers who get up every morning, work hard.
So do low-income earners.
And their family.
Yeah, so do low-income earners. So why...
Yeah, sure.
You could have done it a different way. I just want to explore why you didn't do it a different way. Because...
Well, this is the way we chose to do it. And we've decided that the best thing we can do is really help middle New Zealand families on that average wage, average income, to give them the maximum boost so that they can get through what is a difficult time, and so that we can get the economy going. And
if you want to make sure people spend the money, wouldn't it make more sense to make it more targeted and give it to people on lower incomes who are more likely to spend it, or do it in a different way, give cash back or give rent relief or similar?
Well, there's all sorts of options. The government has obviously increased benefits and has done a lot in terms of free lunches and things like that. And what we've been talking about is that we also think there's a role to help people who are in work and give some tax relief as part of the overall stimulus. There's been $50 billion spent nearly since this crisis began, and we think it's quite appropriate to get some money back into the hands of people who are in work.
Do you have any concerns? Do you have any concerns that, a higher proportion of this goes to wealthier people? That's more money for them to buy assets and extend the wealth gap. Do you have any concerns around that?
Well, the wealth gap is a broad issue right around the world and related to the very low interest rates that we've got, which are putting up asset prices. And that is an issue, and the best solution to that in New Zealand, of course, is the biggest asset that most people have is their house. And the best thing we can do there is focus on increasing the supply of new houses and reducing the cost of building new houses. And that is important. That's why RMA reform is critical. And it's why, we need to be a bit more effective in that area than the government has been with their failed Kiwi Build policy.
OK, let's look at your spending then. So new operating spending, so that's the new money in the budget. Under national, that would drop from around $2.4 billion to $1.8. So what are you going to cut in order to, keep your spending in there?
Well, we don't need to be cutting anything, and this is the misinformation and nonsense that you've been hearing from Grant Robertson and the Prime Minister.
So to be clear, you are not going to cut any spending?
No, well, the point is that every year we've allowed $1.8 billion for new additional spending, and over time that piles up into a colossal sum. So there's plenty of room for additional spending to cope with population increases or wage inflation and all those elements. But what we've done is been a little bit less expansive than Labor, and it's exactly what people would expect from a national government. We're focused on getting the best result.
Less expansive where specifically? Because you say you're not going to cut core public spending, and you've identified that as health, education, and basically law and order. So where are you going to be skimping?
Well, not going to be skimping. We're going to be focusing on results for that spending. And we've got the resources to spend extra to continue to increase spending in those core government areas. But what we're working through is a clear balancing between the need for short-term stimulus through the tax relief, continuing to invest in core public spending at a critical time like this, and then taking over the decade or so, getting us back onto a prudent debt level faster than the government. The government has no plans to get debt under
Okay, I want to
control,
stick with
and
your
we have
plans.
got plans.
Your plans. You say we won't be afraid to eliminate wasteful, low value for money spending. So give me 3 examples of that you're going to bin.
Well, the obvious one is the free fees policy that was brought in.
Labor's already getting rid of that. Yep, second and third year.
They're not. They brought it in and they said it was going to increase access to tertiary education, and fewer students went. And they've just in the last 2 days conceded defeat and are not extending it to the second and third year, but they're still hanging on to the first year. We're going to have to eliminate that. That because it is poor quality spending and it's not actually getting anything extra. Well, we're also going to means test the baby bonus that they brought in, so that is targeted to those who really need it. And then, we'll be more cautious over time with additional spending, and that makes sense.
So you're tightening the belt. Okay. So you're suspending super fund contributions indefinitely, right? So you are still committed, are you, to raising the super age to 67? Are you going to have to do that faster than the 15 years that you were thinking of?
No, we'll keep with that timetable. That gives people plenty of time to prepare, and it reflects the fact that we're living longer, healthier lives. Nothing has to happen immediately on superannuation, but I think over time it's the responsible thing to do. And
so you're
I remember John
absolutely committing to not moving that 15-year deadline any closer. You promise you're not going to do that?
There's no need to be doing that. Our universal superannuation is a very good scheme. It is affordable over time, so long as our country continues to grow. And that's why we've got a real focus on growing the economy, getting jobs, and getting us back on our feet. We've got every confidence that New Zealand will get back on its feet. We're entrepreneurial people. The world wants our goods. It's just a question of how quickly we do that. And
in that vein,
that under our policies, we'll get back faster.
In that vein, you say you're going to restart contributions to the super fund when the government debt is restored to prudent levels. What is that number so that we know when the payments are going to start back up?
Well,
as a percentage of GDP, what does it need to hit for you to start paying that money back in?
Well, I mean, what we've signalled in our current plan is we'll get back to about 35% of GDP. There is no magical number. For a long time, we thought it was around 20%, but the incredibly low interest rates and the
so you can't commit to restarting those payments at a particular point in time. You say prudent levels, but you're not prepared to define what prudent levels is of debt?
No, I'm not going to come up with a date on radio today, other than the fact that we would like to start returning to contributions when we can. But at the moment, we don't think we should be borrowing money to put onto international stock exchanges, which is where it's invested at the moment. We think it's better to put that money into infrastructure in New Zealand right here, right now, and also into the hands of New Zealanders from the 1st of December with our tax relief.
Appreciate your time this evening. That's National's finance spokesperson Paul Goldsmith. Nearly 100 people were tested for COVID-19 in a 3-hour period at a South Auckland school today. Chapel Downs School notified parents on Wednesday that a student had tested positive on Monday. While health officials believe the risk to other students is low, they urged everyone connected to the school to get a test. Jean Bell reports.
The Chapel Downs school testing station was packed today, with a queue of cars lined up along the road outside the school entrance. Whānau Orders Beverly Tauho, who is running the station, says staff tested 95 people in 3 hours. She says some were diverted to a nearby clinic in Whitty because of the high demand. Ms Tauho says the people who came in today were tense.
Anxious, scared, worried, just everything around. I mean, when the media or announcements are made, updates, we've just got to be mindful of all that.
She says it's not just school students and their families who turned up for a test.
Children, family members, siblings, neighbours and locals. We've been testing everyone.
More details have emerged about the circumstances around the child's positive test. The girl was tested over the weekend and the lab produced the positive test on Sunday night. On Monday, the child was taken to school and was there for half an hour, from 8:30 till 9 a.m. The Auckland Regional Public Health Service told her family about the positive test at 8:39am, after which she was picked up from school. Parents had voiced their frustration and anger that they weren't told until Wednesday about the case. But health authorities say they didn't know the child had attended school until Wednesday morning. The school's principal, Vaughan van Rensburg, told Morning Report once the school found out, it acted within minutes to inform the school community. A woman waiting with her grandkids to get a test says she's worried the virus could have spread because of the delay in getting the word out.
It's been 2 days and everybody from the school would have gone everywhere. So now it's trying to contain the cluster from here now.
One parent says he's worried about COVID-19 popping up in his community. His children are getting a test to be sure they are safe to come back to school.
We've seen how bad it can be for people, and we've also, learned, from the science, of the impact of getting the disease. So, yeah, better safe than sorry.
The testing station at Chapel Downs Primary School will be open again tomorrow. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Jeanbell TNA.
A lot of you are getting in touch. You're out there in traffic. Obviously, there's that situation from earlier in the day on the Auckland Harbour Bridge and it's still causing delays. This person says gone 20 metres in 30 minutes, stuck in Sentinel Road, Herne Bay. Another listener, I'm currently sitting on Wellesley Street on-ramp. I've been here for an hour and a half. Sympathies. Megan says, been sitting on Jervois Road trying to access Curran Street on-ramp since 4 p.m. this afternoon. Now 17:11 and I am only a block closer. Pull off and go to a restaurant, Megan. Paul says traffic gridlock in Quay Street for anything heading eastbound towards Quay Street. Waited 30 minutes for a bus to move 100 metres to stop. Now on it and stuck behind another bus blocking our left turn to begin our journey away from the city. And John's got in touch. Hi John, and says an hour and 35 minutes in stationary traffic on Customs Street heading west. Not good. It is almost 27 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Toku mai a koutou whakahoki kōrero. Send me your feedback. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Keen on your thoughts on National's policy on take tax. Dunedin pizza parlour Biggie's is turning away customers who've been in Auckland because of concerns over the spread of COVID-19, but says it's not a blanket ban. A couple posting on social media claimed a staffer at Biggie's Pizza questioned them about whether they were from Auckland and if they've travelled from overseas, and then refused to serve them because they'd been in the super city 16 days earlier. Health authorities say the Auckland community cluster of 54 cases is contained, but the city remains at level 2.5, while the rest of the country is at alert level 2. Biggie's owner, Tacey Millard, says it's a small venue and the health and well-being of her staff is a top priority. She explains her policy on Aucklanders visiting the restaurant.
Each of our customers that enter are judged on a case-by-case basis. We certainly do not have a blanket ban on Aucklanders. Our restaurant manager asks 3 simple questions when people want to come in. One is, had you been travelling and where? Another is, have you been in Auckland? And another is, have you had any COVID symptoms? Now, depending upon the answers to those questions and the attitude of the customers, because obviously we run this on a very high trust level because people can lie to questions. And we make a decision on whether we consider it to be safe to have these people dine as customers in our tiny little restaurant.
Okay, so there's a few things there, Tacey. Let's start with where have you been travelling and if you've been in Auckland. If they say I've been travelling and I've been in Auckland, do they get in?
So we look to minimise risk, so we're looking for that 14-day period. Now, the people who wanted to come in for drinks last night, they had been outside of Auckland for 2 weeks plus 3 days. But they were exceedingly rude to my restaurant manager when she asked questions and were not interested in being helpful at all. So she made the judgment call not to have them dine with us. We have a tiny restaurant and we are under social distancing regulations at the moment, so we've had a lot of tables closed. And our staff are our family, and our loyal customers who are coming every week are our family too, and we look to protect them.
So those customers were rejected on the basis that they had an attitude problem rather than that they had visited Auckland. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I guess it's a combination of both. And we have had a handful of Auckland people come through, and in similar circumstances, people have been lovely and understood the decision made, and been perfectly happy with it. I guess it's an indication of the attitude of these customers that they immediately posted scathing reviews and went straight to the media.
Okay, well, let's put those customers aside for a second.
Mm-hmm.
You seem to be indicating that you are turning away people on the basis that they have come from Auckland. So have you turned away other people because they've been in Auckland or they've visited Auckland or they're Aucklanders?
Yes. At this point in time, there's still community transmission in Auckland, and we consider that to put us at a high risk.
So, well, those Aucklanders are legally able to travel and they can go anywhere in the country.
Yes.
And
although aren't they supposed to be maintaining their 2.5 status?
Yeah, so that means that they can gather in groups of 10. So as long as they came to your restaurant and weren't wanting to seat 12 people at a table, then they would be operating inside the rules. So why have you introduced extra rules?
We've introduced extra rules because we have a very small venue. We've had a drop in our turnover by over 2/3 due to the lockdown levels. There are other venues in town that have had to close because a staff member or a customer has had to go and get COVID testing. And to be fair, if we had to close, that would probably be the straw that broke the camel's back.
But is business good enough that you can pick and choose to turn some customers away because they're from Auckland?
Business is difficult, really difficult at the moment, and we have to make decisions that support our business long term, and support our business at the moment. We have a really close knit family of staff, and we value their health and well-being at the top priority. I don't know that it's in introducing any extra rules because, contrary to popular belief, restaurants and bars are not public property, they're private property, and we have right of refusal for any reason that is not discriminatory.
Yeah, so if an Aucklander or someone who says they've been in Auckland turns up and they don't have any symptoms of COVID, then I'm trying to understand why they wouldn't be welcome.
Because there is active community transmission in Auckland, and we wish to minimise the risk to our staff and customers by not having somebody dine in our premises if they have been in Auckland within the last 2 weeks.
So you are afraid that they will bring COVID into your restaurant?
Fear is a very high factor during this global pandemic, wouldn't you think?
So do you have a mix of managers, or is it always the same person on the door who's asking the questions?
We have one restaurant manager who works every day that we have the restaurant open at this point, and she is in charge of making those decisions.
Okay, so she makes those decisions based on what she hears from the customers?
Yes.
Do you think it's a fair system?
I do, yes. We have incredibly professional and kind staff here who are trying to keep everybody happy and look after everybody in the best way they can. And we are getting an exceeding amount of negative feedback from fake reviews and direct messages, text messages to our restaurant phone, abusive messages. And I feel that she has done exactly what I have asked of her, and I am very happy with how professional she has been and how kind and generous she is to all of our customers.
So, Tacey, are you getting threats?
Are we getting threats? Well, yes, we're getting threats. People are saying that they will tell all of their friends and family not to attend.
Okay, so if Aucklanders are in the area and they can't come and dine in the restaurant, can they still get some takeaways?
We can absolutely deliver to them. We offer contactless delivery. We unfortunately would probably not want them to hang around the restaurant if they wanted to pick up, but I would be happy for them to place an order, and then we would give them contactless handover of that delivery. We'll give them a call when it was ready and they could come and grab it.
And that's Biggie's pizza owner, Tacey Millard. And coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, if you're just joining us, a freak gust of wind has toppled 2 trucks on Auckland's Harbour Bridge today, causing damage to its superstructure and potentially closing 4 lanes for days or even weeks. NZTA's Neil Walker will join us live, plus Queenstown hoteliers line up to welcome sports teams for bespoke isolation. And a silver lining for some New Zealand cancer patients forced to travel to Australia for treatment. Toko mai a koto whakahoki kōrero. Let's send us your feedback, especially on National's take cuts. And if you're an Aucklander, how do you feel about being banned from a Dunedin pizza restaurant? Some of you already getting in touch. You can text us on 2101 and you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us Checkpoint, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. But first, here's Shelley Venning with the headlines.
Transport authorities say the centre span of Auckland's Harbour Bridge could potentially be closed to traffic for weeks. A freak wind gust toppled a truck this morning, damaging the bridge's superstructure. 2 lanes each way have reopened, but rush hour traffic in Auckland is severely disrupted, and the Transport Agency says the 4 central lanes could be closed for weeks. The National Party is defending its plan to pay for temporary tax cuts out of money set aside for a future COVID response. It's unveiled a $4.5 billion tax cut package to be paid for out of the $14 billion COVID recovery fund. National would also suspend contributions to the super fund. Labour leader Jacinda Ardern says the middle of a pandemic and a recession is not the time to cut taxes. She says National's plan is unaffordable and totally irresponsible. Fonterra shareholders are relieved that it's now out of the red with today's full-year profit of $659 million, a marked turnaround after last year's massive loss of $605 million. The dairy cooperative has also announced a milk price of $7.14 per kilogram of milk solids, the 4th highest price in Fonterra's history. The warehouse has confirmed it's cutting the equivalent of 320 full-time jobs, but says the exact number will not be clear until it completes its restructuring late next month. It says the restructure will affect 92 warehouse stores, but the company's other 2 chains, Noel Leeming and Warehouse Stationery, are not affected. The warehouse says changing shopping habits are the reason for the restructure. Services have begun again after a person was struck by a train at Kingsland Station in central Auckland this afternoon. The person is in hospital in a serious condition. And there are no new cases of COVID-19 to report in New Zealand today for the first time since early August. Those are the headlines. Our next news and sport update is at 6.
Kia ora anō, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. The dairy giant Fonterra has turned its fortunes around, producing a big profit after 2 years in the doldrums. It's also announced a strong result for the 10,000 farmers who own it and supply the co-op with milk. They'll get the 4th highest price for their milk in the company's history, $7.14 per kilogram of milk solids, and a 5-cent dividend on top. Maya Barry reports.
Fonterra's figures soared into the clouds in stark contrast with the COVID-grounded economy generally. Profit after tax rose to $659 million, up a massive $1.3 billion on last year's result. The cooperative has had to take some drastic action to get there, including asset sales, restructuring with the closure of plants and loss of jobs, and a tight rein on costs. The company's chief executive, Miles Hurrell, says he's proud of the result, especially with the extra demands and stress of a global pandemic.
2020 was a good year for the co-op, with profit up, debt down and a strong milk price. Our final earnings per share was 24 cents, so at the top end of our earnings guidance. We've also reduced our debt by $1.1 billion in a single year. With improved earnings and a stronger balance sheet comes a return to paying a dividend.
Last year, when the dairy giant reported a $605 million loss, it vowed to turn things around with a change in strategy, focusing on extracting more value from local milk production and putting less emphasis on overseas ventures. Federated Farmers Dairy Chair, Golden Bay farmer Wayne Langford, says having the co-op back in the black is a relief for shareholders.
There's been a real concern of of many farmers that I've talked to, and it's been quite a constant comment. So, good to see them back in the black. The dividend, while not high, it's great to get something. I think is kind of the response I'm getting from farmers.
Canterbury dairy farmer Steve Ireland and his family have been supplying Fonterra for about 25 years. He says it's fantastic Fonterra is no longer in the dark place it was 12 months ago, though he believes it should never have got to that point.
Absolutely not. I mean, there were just some aspirations by some board and CEOs that were probably, in hindsight, I guess, is easy, but yeah, they weren't really in the best interest of New Zealand dairy farmers. To have turned around what they've done, I think it was what was needed. I mean, they've gone back sort of more to basics. I think we can be confident in the new board and the strategies.
Today, Fonterra also announced their highest milk price for farmers for 6 years and one of the highest in the company's history. Mr Ireland says $7.14 per kilogram of milk solids is a good return for his business and will help support rural communities.
It'll help local businesses and spending money on environmental, good environmental practices. I mean, there's a fair amount of investment that's needed there in fencing and other things there too. So it will enable us to get on and do what we need to do.
Murchison dairy farmer John Nichols is also pleased with where the milk price has landed. Having recently purchased the farm, he says their focus is on reducing debt. Mr Nichols thinks there are unanswered questions as to how things went so wrong for the company, but is hopeful lessons have been learned.
We've sold assets that I suppose at the time we were led to believe were good purchases. You don't mind one or two mistakes, but I believe there probably were a number of mistakes that were made, and I just really hope that the people who are making those decisions have really learned from where they went wrong.
Meanwhile, for the new dairy season, which has just got underway, Fonterra is forecasting a payout range of $5.90 to $6.90 per kilogram of milk solids. The company says there is still significant uncertainty, with the impact of COVID-19 still playing out globally. For Checkpoint, Maya Burry.
And let's stick with the business theme. Nicholas Poynton's joined me in the studio. Nicholas, Fonterra wasn't the only major company to put out its full result today. Tourism Holdings Limited. What did they let us all know about?
Yeah, this is the camper van rental and tourism operator. They own those popular brands like Brits and Maui. It's in the rental side of things, and also the company's Kiwi Experience and Discover Waitomo. So amid all this chaos caused by the pandemic, they've actually managed to post a full year profit. But I should caution that by saying that they effectively lost that final quarter. So 3 strong quarters, but it's that final quarter where they really took the big hit. So all up, its net profit after tax was down 5% on last year to $28 million. But you strip out all those big one-off costs and write-downs and the values of its business, it was a $20 million profit, which was down 28% on last year. Revenue down as well, but that's because they really suffered a lot with border closures, not just in New Zealand, but also abroad where they have businesses in Australia and in the US. The company did react quite quickly to the pandemic when it first sort of graced our shores. They looked to cut staff, they cut back on the salaries of its executive team, they also sought some rent relief, and they've also done some but they've looked to sort of refocus the strategy of the business. So one thing that they've done is, in the past they've been a camper van rental business, but now they are a camper van dealer. They've been looking to reduce the size of its fleet globally, this is for rental vehicles, by 1/3. And they say that's had quite a successful effect. It's actually helped them pay back a lot of the debt it's taken out to cover some of the expenses during the pandemic. The future of this company, this is what we really want to pay attention to. We all kind of knew what it was going to look like in its full year result, and they say they're going to continue to sell RVs, and they're going to focus on domestic tourism. But the question remains is you can't really sell your fleet forever, and at the moment we have no idea when borders are going to open. So, but the interesting thing is, despite all this uncertainty about the future, its share price was up 10%. By about 21 cents to $2.35. So it probably shows how much I know.
Hey, we talked about yesterday mobile phone plans, right? And the Commerce Commission suggesting that the companies are overcharging people for plans that they don't need. So you had a chance to talk to the
Yes, I
telcos,
did. I did indeed, and it was I'm stoked to be able to get to this because it's a story that really interested me. So quickly, just recapping on yesterday. Commerce Commission, they published this open letter. In particular, they signal out the big telcos that Spark, Vodafone and 2 Degrees. And they say they did this big review and they found that of over 80,000 customers that it reviewed over a 12-month period, about a quarter were paying for plans that they weren't really maximising the value of. And it said to these telcos that they needed to really step in and make sure people were on the right plans. Well, I was able to put this question, or put the concerns raised by the Commission to the head of the Telecommunications Forum. So that's the big industry body that represents all these companies. And he, unsurprisingly, pushed back against many of the suggestions put forward by the Commerce Commission. First of all, he questioned the conclusions the Commission drew from the data. He says that, yes, all right, maybe there is a quarter of people that should be on different plans, but it also indicates that 3/4 of people are on the right plan. And he sort of took that as an opportunity to give the industry a bit of a pat on the back. He also says the Commission should be very cautious about making assumptions about the type of plans people are on. The example he used that was one of the most expensive mobile plans you can go on is one with unlimited mobile data. And for people who do that, they just like to have that flexibility, whether or not they should be on that plan. That's doesn't really matter. It's the fact that people pay to have that flexibility, that if they do want to go run wild and use lots and lots of data and stream Netflix on the bus ride home, they can. And the other thing he says was that he was saying that, look, the industry, they do welcome these calls for transparency and they're going to look to work with the Commission over this. But he did say that in terms of the health of the competition in the market, there's a lot of churn, and this is a term that we use to describe people who are leaving one company to join another. About 36% of the people in this survey, or this research that the Commerce Commission did, actually switched companies. And he uses this as evidence that there's a lot of competition in the market. People are actively going out and reviewing what the best deals out there and choosing plans that really meet their needs. So, look, what we've seen from both the regulator and the industry is that they've both drawn these lines in the sand. And it's going to be really exciting to see what happens next.
Okay. Speaking about what's next, the markets.
Yeah. So the NZX Top 50, it's down by about 1.2% to 11,634. Our dollar is at 67.8 US cents, 92.7 Australian, 52.3 British pence, and gold is up about 0.5% to 1,952 US dollars an ounce.
Thanks, Nicholas. Nicholas Poynton with business there. Backpackers in New Zealand who bought visas from companies connected with STA Travel are pleading with immigration officials to let them access the jobs they were promised. At least one of them unwittingly became an overstayer after being told by staff her work exchange visa application was already being processed. Jill Bonnet reports.
About 200 travellers in a Facebook group are among those seeking answers about where their cash went after they bought a visa they then couldn't use. They were already in New Zealand. Some were on visitor visas, others on working holiday visas, and were wary about returning to their home countries ravaged by coronavirus. So, like 33-year-old Helen Platten from the UK, they were happy when STA Travel affiliates IEP Visas and Bunak told them they could apply for work exchange visas to extend their stays.
I was absolutely overjoyed. I can't tell you how relieved I was. I was in absolute floods of tears on the phone because it was something I hadn't even dreamed was possible.
Some of them, like hospitality worker Mindy from the US, fear their desperation was taken advantage of. She says she did what she could to check it was true.
IEP made a big announcement on the 6th saying that if you were currently in New Zealand with a working holiday visa that you could apply. And a lot of us, including myself, called immigration to ask if this was okay, if we could still go through with it. And we all got a yes.
She says there's been conflicting information from immigration since IEP and STA went into administration, but she's still hopeful.
I don't even know how many different things. Every day it's something different. So we're just unsure if we can legally stay here with the work visa that we were led to believe that we could obtain.
Immigration New Zealand said in a statement only those offshore when they applied would have been eligible for the one-year visa. It says the scheme has a quota of 1,000 people a year and IEP had up to 450 of them. The first 32-year-old Bonnie Toy from New York knew about a problem was when she called Immigration New Zealand to find that her visa had expired and she'd become an overstayer.
I didn't know that I was unlawful in the country for almost a month, and nobody told me. Nobody told me this was even issued for us. Apparently,
BUNAC did it on my behalf, knowing darn well that they didn't send it on time. They never even sent immigration the money.
Immigration waived her visitor visa fee after hearing what had happened to her. But that still left her plan for a year of work here and possible later residence in tatters. Helen Platten and other affected backpackers say a compromise which might work for them and New Zealand would be if they were allowed to stay and fill the well-publicised gap for agricultural workers.
A lot of us are from the UK and from America as well, and we are adaptable, flexible, and really want to just pitch in and help.
Those affected say the money that's tied up in non-existent visa applications could have been used to pay for their living costs. They say it's daunting to be in a foreign country with dwindling funds and nowhere to turn. The administrators, Deloitte, say an IEP creditors committee was formed and they're working to identify those affected and how to help them. Immigration New Zealand says it's working with Deloitte to see what visa options are available to assist the applicants. STA, IEP and BUNAC have been approached for comment. The Immigration Advisors Authority is urging people to get in touch if they're concerned about the advice they got or who they got it from. For Checkpoint, Jill Bonnet.
Queenstown hoteliers are lining up to welcome sports teams for bespoke isolation as they and the teams await some indication from the government about whether they'll be allowed in. The resort town has been mooted as a potential location to host touring teams, but as the clock ticks down, the need for clarity grows. Tess Brunton reports.
The countdown is on to the summer of cricket, but New Zealand cricket is still waiting for government approval to get their international sides into the country. It wants to host the West Indies in November, and Bangladesh and Australia are other proposed visitors. Queenstown has positioned itself as the best place to host the teams for their isolation period. Queenstown Chamber of Commerce chairperson Craig Douglas says having sports stars isolate in the resort opens up opportunities.
Sports teams coming in come with certainty and longevity that our traditional domestic tourism market doesn't offer. At the moment, many of our businesses are really unsure about what sort of level of business they're going to be doing tomorrow, let alone next week or next month.
About 130 New Zealand-owned and operated accommodation providers are part of the Lakes District Accommodation Sector Group. Its spokesperson and hotelier Nick Kittle says they're staring down the barrel of at least a year of economic devastation. He says bespoke isolation is an opportunity they couldn't pass up.
This district needs to be part of that just as much as any other district in New Zealand is. And let's face it, every other New Zealand district is playing its part, and we're probably the only ones who have yet to put up our hand. So I think we've come to the conclusion that we as a group in this district would like to support the government in any way we can, and we do have the capacity to do so.
Nick Kittle has been in touch with the Minister in charge of managed isolation facilities, Megan Woods, to put forward a list of smaller New Zealand-owned operators who would be willing hosts should Queenstown get the nod.
The smaller and medium-sized enterprise, family-owned New Zealand businesses that provide accommodation in the district really do need to have a shot in the arm. They need this economic injection, possibly a lot more than the internationally branded franchise hotels. And there are a lot of us who are willing to play our part.
He says having guarantees means businesses can hire confidently and be more sure about their future. It's not the first time the resort town has been mooted as an isolation destination. Back in June, the Prime Minister raised the possibility of hosting managed isolation there for the general public, but that was ruled out as an inappropriate location less than a month later. Queenstown Lakes District Council Chief Executive Mike Teelan says hosting sport teams is a whole different ballgame.
They're a much more predictable group. You would know who they were, where they were, why they were there, and that would enable, I suppose, the hotel to manage that more simply. It would also enable the health authorities to, know exactly the quantum and who they were dealing with.
He says the resort town is in a good position to be considered as a host. Sports Minister Grant Robertson says any decision on where to isolate teams needs to be carefully considered.
We're still working on that, but we are managing the discussions we're having at the moment with netball and cricket and so on in such a way that I think we can probably manage it within the facilities we have, but we'll keep those discussions going.
He says they will be considering the health risks before teams arrive.
Well, it's more about the risk assessment for people in managed isolation and quarantine, and that was the very issue around the Rugby Championship, was obviously with Australia we can have a degree of confidence about the team that's coming over and where they've been in recent times. If we look at Argentina and South Africa, you both had countries where COVID was considerably more prevalent, and in the case of the Argentinian team was prevalent in the team. So, we have to look at those risk profiles for each country as they come.
Nick Kittle says Queenstown hoteliers are hopeful to have more clarity soon.
There have been some signals from government that it's wanting to get some of this planning finalised and off the starting blocks sometime around November, so that the different sporting opportunities that will roll out over summer may be able to be provided for here.
But for now, the ball is in the government's court as teams and fans wait on whether they'll see live international action on home soil. For Checkpoint, Cortes Brunton, TNA.
It is about, 5 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Two of France's biggest cities, Lyon and Nice, have been told they must come up with new measures to help prevent the spread of coronavirus by Saturday. The BBC's Lucy Williamson reports.
Marseille's main intensive care unit has become a changing room again. Familiar routines resurrected for a new wave of COVID patients. This time it's a 65-year-old man on life support. They're putting a camera down his throat. One of the riskiest jobs. The ventilators on their suits purify the air inside their masks. His wife calls for news once or twice a day. She's not allowed in to see him.
Now it's becoming very disturbing because we are split between the desire to treat the patient, of course, and the best as possible, and also to treat non-COVID patients in the appropriate way. That is to find ICU beds, to have surgery, to manage trauma patients and so on. So it's very difficult to manage.
Marseille is the epicenter of France's new COVID crisis. The director of public hospitals here says the system is nearing saturation, with only a handful of intensive care beds left and 100 extra staff recruited in the past week. Rates of infection in Marseille are now twice that of Paris. Over 10% of those tested here are positive.
Lucy Williamson reporting. Singapore has one of the lowest rates of COVID-19 deaths in the world. It's recorded 27 deaths despite having more than 57,000 people who've been infected with the virus. Emma McCarthy reports.
Singapore, the city-state of 5.7 million people, has seemingly weathered the COVID-19 storm better than anywhere else in the world, with a death rate of only 0.05%, way lower than the global average of about 3%, even among countries of similar size like Denmark and Finland. It means that of the 57,000 infections, there's only been 27 deaths in Singapore. But how has the island managed such a feat? Singapore's leading disease experts said there's a number of factors behind the country's success. First, Singapore was very successful in containing the spread of the virus through early detection, using aggressive contact tracing and testing that won praise from the WHO. It has tested nearly 900,000 people, one of the highest per capita rates globally. Dormitory residents have been put on a rostered testing regime. Authorities have undertaken mass testing among vulnerable communities, including care homes, and anyone over 13 with signs of acute respiratory infection is offered a free test. This preemptive approach has also been applied to treatment. Doctors said that COVID-19 patients above 45 years or with underlying conditions are cared for in hospital, even if they are otherwise well. It also built up bed space for coronavirus patients in exhibition halls and temporary facilities to house those with mild or no symptoms. This prevented the healthcare system from being overwhelmed so that attention and resources could be focused on the more severe cases. It's difficult to compare across borders though. Singapore strictly adheres to the WHO's case definition for classifying COVID-19 deaths. So it does not include non-pneumonia fatalities like those caused by blood or heart issues among COVID-19 patients in its official tally. The country's health ministry has said its approach is consistent with international practice.
And that was Emma McCarthy reporting. Hey, lots of feedback on Biggie's Pizza in Dunedin. It's not that keen on having Aucklanders in the restaurant there because of concerns about COVID. This listener says, good on the restaurant for not allowing numpties into their place. Someone else says, Biggie's Pizza, how petty, get a life, read the rules. Ian says, I strongly support the pizza owner. If everyone had her attitude, the community spread in Auckland wouldn't have occurred. Rob from Cambridge says, bravo to that lady from Biggie's Pizza. Sound judgment and sensible decision-making based on the value she places on her staff and regular customers. But this one, and I'm from the Auckland region, going to Dunedin next week. I'll spend my Auckland dollars elsewhere. Biggie's Pizza don't seem to understand the regulations and protocols, says Steve. Jim says, as an Aucklander, I know there are those who refuse to wear masks or take the pandemic seriously. I congratulate the lady who doesn't want customers like that in her place.
RNZ News at 6. No mai haere mai, I'm Shelley Venning. The 4 middle lanes of Auckland's Harbour Bridge will remain closed over the weekend to repair damage caused when a truck rolled in a gust of wind this morning. Waka Kotahi, the transport agency, is asking motorists to avoid crossing the bridge if possible due to congestion. Spokesperson Neil Walker says the accident has damaged the bridge and the 4 middle lanes will be closed for the weekend at least.
We're currently having a look at the damage and trying to determine how long it's going to take us to get it repaired. It's a reasonably important part of the bridge, so we can't run traffic on it while that damage is there.
Neil Walker says the truck was removed earlier, but the damage is substantial. The agency is urging people to delay any unnecessary travel on all of Auckland's motorways due to heavy congestion clogging the network. National is pitching a major economic and tax plan to voters, promising to temporarily raise the income thresholds if elected. But Labour's calling the plan irresponsible. Here's our political reporter, Katie Scotcher.
National expects the tax cuts paid for out of the COVID recovery fund will put just under $50 a week extra in the taxpayer's pocket. The tax changes would be in place for 16 months from December this year and are worth $4.5 billion. The party is also promising to pay back debt faster and run a tighter budget for new spending. Superfund contributions would again be suspended and spending initiatives like the fees-free tertiary policy and Kiwi Build scrapped. But Labour leader Jacinda Ardern says now is not the time to cut taxes and National's plan is totally irresponsible. Call Katie Scott Churaho.
The head of a COVID-19 testing centre at an Auckland school says the people who came through are tense. A pupil attended the Chapel Downs School near Botany briefly on Monday morning and returned a positive test that afternoon. The testing station has been swamped today and Beverly Taoho from Whānau Ora says people are anxious and scared about having a case in the community. Coronavirus cases in South Korea that can't be tracked have reached a new high. Over the past 2 weeks, the authorities have been unable to track the source of more than a quarter of positive tests. Bruce Harrison reports from Seoul.
Disease control officials say 532 of 2,013 new cases have unknown transmission routes. The number of untraceable cases creeped above 20% in mid-August and continues to climb amid South Korea's latest COVID-19 spike. The Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency said this means patients without any symptoms or mild symptoms have the potential to spread the virus further. The agency said the growing number of untraceable cases means the government faces greater challenges in contact tracing. Cases jumped in South Korea last month, at one point reaching 441 cases in a single day. Bruce Harrison, Seoul.
A paedophile who was found with a cache of child sexual exploitation material has been sent back to prison for 3.5 years. Despite previously serving a sentence of imprisonment for repeatedly abusing several young people, Nikola Michael Marinovic was hired as a freelance camera operator and did work for the kids' TV show What Now? Customs investigators then raided Marinovic's Pukekohe home in May last year and found over 4,000 child abuse pictures and videos, some involving infants. He pleaded guilty to 7 charges relating to possessing, making and distributing objectionable material and was today sentenced in the Auckland District Court. A 6-year-old child has died after an incident on a farm in Bay of Plenty yesterday afternoon. Emergency services were called to the farm in Opotiki around 5 o'clock. WorkSafe has launched an investigation and the police assisted with initial inquiries. The death has now been referred to the coroner. People with neuroendocrine cancers who've been unable to get to Australia for treatment due to the border closure will now be able to get treatment here. Patients had been travelling to Melbourne to get the treatment peptide receptor radionuclide therapy, but it was put on hold. The Ministry of Health, Auckland District Health Board and other agencies have worked to make it available in Auckland temporarily. The Unicorn Foundation, which has been advocating for local treatment, says it will provide wraparound services. Spokesperson Michelle Sullivan says the treatment greatly improves people's lifespan. A Dunedin restaurant owner has confirmed 2 people were kicked out of her establishment because they were from Auckland, but also because they were rude to a staff member. Biggie's Pizza owner, Tacey Millard, says multiple Aucklanders have been refused entry to her restaurant because there's still community transmission of COVID-19 in the city of Sales. She told Checkpoint Aucklanders should order takeout instead.
Unfortunately, we'd probably not want them to hang around the restaurant if they wanted to pick up, but I would be happy for them to place an order and then we would give them contactless handover of that delivery. We'll give them a call when it was ready and they could come and grab it.
Tacey Millard says her restaurant has received a barrage of bad reviews and abusive messages as a result of its stance. In sport, the New Zealand Rugby Players Association boss Rob Nichol concedes the Rugby Championship may not go ahead, but says the All Blacks are committed to playing 2 return Bledisloe Cup tests in Australia regardless. South African Rugby have made it clear the Springboks' participation in the tournament is still very much up in the air. The same can be said for Argentina after several players and their head coach tested positive for COVID-19. Nichol says they hope to have a full itinerary and plan for how long the All Blacks will be in Australia by the end of next week. He says if South Africa decide to skip the competition, the All Blacks are still keen to head across the ditch for 2 tests against the Wallabies.
We would still go for the Bleds, I think, is everyone's view. So we want to play the 2 Bleds here. And then if we head to Australia, we'd still go to play the Bleds anyway. And then obviously be able to come back early, which I think on the dates, whether you play 2 or 3 Bleds, you'd get back towards the end of November after quarantine.
Rob Nichol. The new All Black squad will be together for the first time when a 3-day camp is held in Whakatane at the start of next week. Meanwhile, the New Zealand Māori wing, Sean Wainui, has signed a 2-year contract extension with the Chiefs Super Rugby side. The Warriors have landed a pair of Olympic gold medal winning Sevens players for their looming NRLW campaign. Australian Sevens pair Alia Green and Ivania Peliti have been named in the New Zealand club squad. The squad also features 5 New Zealand-based players and 4 players from the Australian International League side. The NRLW kicks off next month alongside the men's NRL Finals series. That's the news.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
We've gone out and done our best to tackle a pandemic, and in doing so, we've locked up our economies.
Live with local, national and international stories as they happen.
In newspapers at the time, there were a lot of advertisements describing how to make these, and it was usually a piece of gauze that would be folded over and tied around your head just with fabric ties.
Up to date if you're up late. Lately with Karen Hay every weeknight from 10 on RNZ National.
This is RNZ National, on air, online and on your mobile. Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty, fine, with the odd shower in Northland and Auckland today, and isolated showers everywhere tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Rain clearing to fine this evening, isolated showers tomorrow afternoon and evening, mainly about the ranges. Waikato to Manawatu, including the Central High Country, cloudy periods with isolated showers tomorrow. Wellington, Horowhenua, Kapiti Coast and Wairarapa, fine weather. Nelson and Marlborough, fine with isolated showers from tomorrow afternoon. Canterbury and Otago, mainly fine, a few showers about southern Otago. Buller, Westland, Fiordland and Southland, fine spells and a few showers clearing from Westland tomorrow morning. And for the Chatham Islands, a few showers. RNZ National, it is almost 8 minutes past 6.
Kia ora anō, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Traffic in parts of the super city is moving super slowly this evening after a freak accident on Auckland's Harbour Bridge. Some lanes on the bridge could be out of action for several weeks after a massive gust of wind toppled two trucks, causing damage to the bridge's superstructure. The incident closed lanes, caused huge snakes of gridlocked traffic, and two lanes each way have now reopened, but motorists are being told to avoid the bridge entirely if they can. Neil Walker of Waka Kotahi joins us now with the latest. Hi Neil, what's it looking like out there?
Well, it's pretty busy in Auckland at the moment if you're going anywhere near the bridge at the moment. So obviously there's a lot of congestion because we've halved the capacity of the bridge. But we've got our people working on it at the moment to see what we can do to get it open as soon as we can. It's been a reasonable bit of damage to one part of the bridge though, and that's on that centre piece with the arches. We've got our people having a look at the moment to see what we can do around trying to get it open with a temporary fix as soon as we can. But it is going to probably take us the weekend to have confidence on when we think we can do that.
Okay, can you just sort of explain a little bit more about the damage? What's critical about that arch and what exactly has happened to it?
It was the larger of the two trucks that was involved this morning. Actually, it hit one of the part of the structure on the bridge. It's put a reasonable deformed basically it's a strut which runs on the bridge, and so our engineers at the moment are looking at to see what we think we need to do to actually. We're going to have to do two things. I think one is what's the permanent fix for it. So we'll have to refabricate part of the bridge. But the second part is what can we do in the meantime to firm it up so that we can put some light traffic back on it in the meantime. They're going to be spending the whole weekend working on that. We're going to have people up having a closer look to the actual damage on the bridge itself. And we really need to do that in the morning. We couldn't do it today because of the wind conditions. So.
Yeah, so what is the concern about the damage? I mean, what does that translate to in terms of I know the bridge is still safe to use, but what is the potential risk that you're trying to deal with here?
It's taking the part that has been damaged at the moment, refabricating it, and then it's not just a matter of replacing, parts of steel on the bridge. They've got to be treated and so forth. We've got to make sure that when we take it off, any movement in the overall structure and so forth as well, is that we're fully considering all of that so that when the permanent fix is made, that it's done properly.
So can the bridge cope with normal loads of traffic? I mean, in terms of actual physical weight and the structure of the bridge?
Yeah, so where the traffic's travelling on at the moment is what they call the clip-ons, and the clip-ons are actually supported by their own structure. So that's all been looked at to make sure that it's safe to do that.
So you're potentially looking at weeks for a permanent fix. So what does that mean in practical terms for people who use that every day?
Well, there's 8 lanes and we're down to 4, so with half the capacity on it. So it's going to have some impact on traffic trying to travel across the harbour. Our advice to people is, look, it's going to take us a while, and so really while we're doing the repairs, we're asking people to have a really think about their travel, when they need to travel and so forth. We've got Route 16, Route 20, that's the alternate route, the Western Ring route, and that's the alternate route for people to travel. But while there's extra demand on the Auckland network, it's obviously there's going to be congestion across the network. So our goal is to make sure we can try and get the thing open as quickly as we can, but we want to make sure we do that so that it's safe, whatever with the repairs that are taken and were done properly.
Realistically, what are you aiming for then, Neil, for the temporary fix? When do you hope to have that in place?
We'll have a better idea, I think, over the weekend. As I say, we've still got to have people out having a look, and we don't really want to make any predictions until we've actually had a really, really good look at it, and we're confident around how long that's going to take. So I'm not sure. I think we'll have a better view on that later in the weekend.
Yeah. So these trucks, was it just that they're higher than the other vehicles, and when the gusts came through, that's why they took the brunt of it?
Yeah, well, definitely the higher side vehicles don't handle the wind as well. It was an exceptional gust though we had, because generally we do monitor the wind speed on the bridge, and it was the gusts were well below the threshold when we had ever considered closing the bridge. But
what is that threshold, Neil? Just curious, what is
110 kilometres.
So, and there was no indication of that, so hence it was open.
It was gusting well under that when, and then we had a freak gust come through.
Should trucks be on the bridge, do you reckon, or should they take another route normally because of this risk?
Well, the bridge has been designed to carry trucks. I mean, it's, there's risk for anyone travelling across any of our roads when we've got heavy windy conditions, and there's, vans and motorcycles and all of those are at risk when you're travelling in a gusty conditions. So.
Appreciate your time this evening. That is Neil Walker of Waka Kotahi there. That bridge, damage to the Auckland Harbour Bridge with those big gusts of winds and the 2 trucks hitting part of the bridge structure there. It could be weeks until there is a permanent fix. Tax cuts have now become a major election issue, with National unveiling a massive but short-term package. It's worth about $4.5 billion and would run from this December to March 2022, delivering about $3,000 to the average wage earner. The money would come out of the $14 billion set aside for future COVID response, with National arguing the tax cuts would help address an economic crisis. Superfund contributions would again be suspended, and spending cut on government initiatives like the fees-free tertiary policy and Kiwi Build. Our political editor Jane Patterson filed this report.
It's clear that you need to keep more of your money so you can invest and grow. We need a short-term stimulus package, and we need it quickly.
Nationals leader Judith Collins rolling out the big guns.
Earlier this year, I had stated I didn't plan to cut taxes, but that was before the second lockdown. The forecast of 15 years of deficit has confirmed our economy is in a very bad state.
The plan also includes more generous tax write-downs for business assets, a reduction in the amount available for new spending each year, and a plan to pay back debt faster. National's finance spokesperson Paul Goldsmith was asked if he could rule out cuts to core public spending.
Absolutely. What we've allowed for in this budget is an extra $1.8 billion of additional spending in each budget, and that more than adequately allows for continued investment in core public sector services.
And he defended using about a third of the COVID money set aside for the likes of a second wave on tax cuts. Mr Goldsmith says they're confident they'd still have enough to deal with any future COVID response.
Look, we think $9 billion left in the fund is sufficient. Obviously, nobody can predict what will happen next year. If we need to borrow more, we will have to borrow more, but we think we've got enough to deal with that.
Judith Collins also defends the fact the plan advantages higher income earners and businesses.
I don't think nurses, teachers or police officers would tell you that they think they're the wealthiest New Zealanders. Actually, they need a break. They have the highest marginal tax rates at the moment. They need a break. They need the money, and we need them to have it.
Labour leader Jacinda Ardern says the plans are responsible.
And is raiding from a fund that has to be available to make sure that we as a nation can keep responding to the challenge of COVID, not deliver unaffordable tax cuts.
Labour's finance spokesperson Grant Robertson doesn't believe National when it commits to not cutting public services.
What this will mean is that the money that's needed to fund our hospitals and our schools is compromised. It simply doesn't add up. There is no way that they will be able to meet even the basic costs of funding DHBs or funding our primary schools with the amount of money they've left themselves here.
ACT leader David Seymour says National's trying to have its cake and eat it too. And he says yo-yoing tax cuts aren't what New Zealanders need right now.
ACT's tax cuts are permanent, and that's the way that you should do it. But you have to be prepared to look at spending in order to achieve that.
Greens co-leader James Shaw says the plan presents a dire risk to health, education and nature.
If you look at what they're planning to do, it is to underfund critical public services over the course of the next 10 years. And that's what they did with the time that they were in government over the last 10 years.
New Zealand First leader Winston Peters says it's not going to get National elected to government.
I don't believe the majority of New Zealanders contemplating the crisis we're in think that they, having less tax to pay, is the solution. I don't expect to do that. I don't think New Zealanders expect to do that.
National's also revised its plan to repay debt, to do it more slowly given the forecasts in the pre-election Treasury update, but it would still look to pay it off more quickly than the government has signalled, back to 34% of gross domestic product by 2034. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
COVID-19 border restrictions have had a silver lining for cancer patients who were receiving treatment in Australia. The Ministry of Health, Auckland District Health Board and other agencies have worked to provide a specific type of therapy in Auckland on an interim arrangement, a treatment people usually have to travel to Melbourne for. Sally Murphy reports.
Chris Holmes was diagnosed with neuroendocrine cancer in 2011 at the age of 49.
The recommendation at that stage, somewhat surprisingly, was to have palliative treatment, palliative care.
After radiation, having part of his liver removed and doing a monthly injection to stem the growth of his cancer, Mr Holmes heard about peptide receptor radionuclide therapy, or PRRT. It wasn't available here, so he flew to Melbourne for 4 rounds of the treatment.
That had a significant impact. So, I can look at what my scans were like prior to going over to Peter Mac compared to what they look like after, and the pictures are completely different in terms of reduction in tumours. Getting this treatment in Auckland is just, it's a godsend for a lot of people. PRRT has saved my life, that's for sure.
Mr Holmes says he was lucky the therapy was covered under his health insurance, otherwise he would have had to foot the $50,000 bill. It was self-funded by people until October last year, when the Ministry of Health started paying for patients to have the treatment in Melbourne. The Unicorn Foundation has been advocating for PRRT to be available here. Chief Executive Dr Michelle Sullivan said getting the treatment in New Zealand, even as an interim arrangement, is a result of years of work.
People will be coming from around the country. There's a lot of assistance being put in place. So one part of that is the accommodation at Domain Lodge. Another part of that is Unicorn Foundation provides on-ground support while they're here in Auckland getting the treatment.
Ms Sullivan is hopeful the treatment, which is paid for by the Ministry of Health, will be made regularly available, but says it needs a lot of resources.
It requires testing the doses, so we need to know that it's the right amount of radioactivity to be putting into someone. It needs specific nuclear medicine skills, and it needs a particular scanner.
Malcolm Leggett has had 11 rounds of PRRT since being diagnosed with cancer 9 years ago. Like Chris, he has seen a massive reduction in the size of his tumours and credits the treatment for him still being alive.
I haven't completely added it all up, but it would overall it would probably come to more than $200,000, I guess. It just seems very unjust that some New Zealanders haven't been able to access this at all, had to travel overseas, which is really not the case for pretty much any other cancer now in New Zealand.
He says it's amazing more people will have access to the treatment. Pharmac has a funding application for PRRT, which is in its prioritisation process. For Checkpoint, Sally Murphy.
It is almost 22 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A New Zealand-born woman who's been denied entry to Australia, where she's lived since she was a child, because of the country's cap on hotel quarantine numbers. The federal government has written to leaders of states and territories asking them to boost hotel quarantine capacity to allow more Australians stuck overseas to return home. The ABC's Bridget Fitzgerald reports.
London-based Hannah Fairweather was so close to getting back to Australia she'd managed to book a seat on a flight home, but was barred from boarding the plane.
So we had to go to Terminal 2 Airport, and we spent a week there sending every document under the sun to no avail.
The 26-year-old was born in New Zealand and moved to Perth as a child. After the past 2 years living in the UK, she and her brother Kenneth are keen to return to the safety of home. The siblings were granted an exemption by the West Australian government, and as New Zealand citizens holding a special category subclass 444 visa, they should have been allowed to return, but were stopped by Australian Border Force officials.
We thought, having grown up and spent the majority of our lives in Australia, made us usual residents, but they have a very arbitrary 2-year rule that they said if you've not been in the country in the past 2 years, then you're not welcome back.
As the head of Tourism Accommodation Australia, the peak body for hotel accommodation, Michael Johnson says Australians he's never met have been seeking him out on LinkedIn to send him messages about being stranded overseas.
Clutching at clouds, any way, shape or form that they can hook onto someone that might be able to help them get back.
He says the hotel sector can accommodate the Commonwealth's plans to lift the cap on return travellers to $6,000 a week, but only if supported by government.
The hotels have got the necessary protocols in place, but the actual quarantine process, which is outside of the hotel's control, is critical, as we know.
Though occupancy rates at city hotels are still low, any increase to quarantine will require planning around domestic guests as Australians begin to respond to government campaigns to take staycations. West Australian Premier Mark McGowan this week flagged return travellers could be sent to Perth's Rottnest Island, which was used to quarantine cruise ship travellers earlier this year.
Bridget Fitzgerald reporting. Italy is trialling new compulsory COVID testing at Rome Airport in order to avoid mass quarantine as governments around the world try to come up with new ways to allow people to travel. The BBC's Mark Lowen reports.
Only passengers who test negative for COVID-19 will be permitted to board this flight.
Tickets, passport and a compulsory negative test result. Welcome aboard Europe's first COVID-free flight.
Final call for the passengers on Alitalia flight 2.
All the passengers on this Rome to Milan service need to have been tested at Rome's Fiumicino airport before the flight or elsewhere within the previous 72 hours and to show proof of it before being allowed to travel. These are the guinea pigs of Europe for a scheme not only designed to reassure passengers but also to help air travel to recover. And if successful, this could be rolled out for other domestic and international flights.
I think it's better like this than just go inside the airplane without knowing if the other people are positive or negative. It is fast and I have to come to the airport just 2 hours before the airplane.
Does it make you feel more confident about flying?
Yeah, really, because even if someone has the mask down the face, I feel more secure and confident with other passengers.
Well, this is where the COVID testing takes place inside the airport. I'm on the arrivals floor and passengers who come in from certain countries or who now want to fly to Milan queue up here, take a ticket identifying themselves with a number, then they're led through into one of the booths to have the nasal swab. They're being told that the result comes through in just 30 minutes. It's quick, it's efficient, it's simple, and it allows Italy to get around the need for mandatory quarantine.
In una cartuccia come questa ne prendiamo una nuova.
Teresa Esposito runs the testing centre here.
This
was a political decision that Italy made to protect the health of our population as much as possible and to stop positive cases coming through the border. And until there is a vaccine available, this will probably be the future.
And so an industry crushed by COVID is trying to make us all feel safe again and lure us back on board. Italy, once the global epicenter of coronavirus, is hoping to lead the way to pandemic-safe skies.
Mark Lowen reporting. To the US state of Oregon now, where a group of more than 1,000 volunteers known as the Hillbilly Brigade have come together to fight one of the biggest fires in more than a century. 9,000 residents were evacuated from the small town of Molalla, and as Chris Dignam reports, the Hillbilly Brigade is credited with saving it.
We are building fire lines and putting out the fires, building fire lines so they don't crawl back up this way.
Nicole West and her border collie, Oink, are members of the recently formed Hillbilly Brigade, a group of about 1,200 all told, who came together this past week to fight Oregon's biggest fire in a century, and they're credited with saving the small town of Molalla after its 9,000 residents were forced to evacuate.
We all just started coming up Monday evening when we found out about it. We got up here about 2 o'clock in the morning and started bringing equipment and water trucks, and chainsaws and anything we could find, and whatever people told us to do is what we went out and did.
With her bulldozer and oink-riding shotgun, West and a volunteer crew of untrained and unofficial firefighters pulled off what residents and fire officials are calling a miracle on the front lines of the Riverside fire.
One of the main causes are these snags that fall. They run up it, runs up it all the way up to the top, and it's like dynamite, and then it blows up and spreads everything everywhere.
The Hillbilly Brigade organized and deployed themselves with little or no help from the small and overwhelmed local fire department or from state and federal agencies who were sent elsewhere.
When the government bailed, we all stayed and worked and fought the fire. Other than that, it would have been completely out of control.
The fire marshal for the Molalla Fire District, which has just 13 firefighters and 33 volunteers, called the massive ad hoc effort amazing, saying, quote, "These are just regular guys from the area." West, a 36-year-old ranch hand, and her Hillbilly Brigade compatriots, consisting of lumberjacks, dairy farmers, friends, and neighbors, say the operation has been a success because they knew each other and the difficult terrain better than any outsider.
All the volunteers that are volunteering food and their time and their equipment and fuel and parts and mechanics, all that to come in together, we wouldn't have stopped this fire.
The wildfires in the area are not yet contained, and residents here are still on edge. Jesus. But many are optimistic that the miles of fire lines the Hillbilly Brigade cut through the forest will provide a buffer if the winds blow the flames back their way.
Traffic is still bad out there, so avoid the bridge if you can. This one in says, feel for you Aucklanders. Left my office in the centre of Oamaru and home on my 14-hectare lifestyle block by the sea 9 minutes later. Local craft beer in hand. That's unsigned, but I reckon that's chuffed of Oamaru. Just a reminder, there's no election tomorrow if you were wondering. Have a great weekend. We'll be back on Monday.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Motorists are being asked to avoid crossing Auckland's Harbour Bridge after the metal span was damaged when a freak wind gust toppled a truck this morning. National is promising temporary tax cuts if elected, but Labour is calling the plan irresponsible for raiding the COVID-19 response fund. Pedophile Nikola Michael Marinovich has been sent back to jail for 3.5 years after being found with a cache of child sexual abuse images. And a person is in a critical condition after being hit by a train at Kingsland Station in Auckland. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7. RNZ National, this is Trending Now, our feature highlighting the stories you've been sharing via digital and social media. But first,